September 19th, 1944, 6:45 hours. The fog over the Lorraine plains near Arracourt is so thick that visibility drops to under 100 meters. German Panther tank commanders, leading the spearhead of the 5th Panzer Army's counterattack, are navigating by compass because they cannot see the tree lines. They know American armor is somewhere ahead of them. They don't know exactly where. Somewhere in that fog, a vehicle weighing 17.7 tons and carrying 25 millimeters of armor at its thickest point is about to kill 4 Panthers in 11 minutes. It is going to do this not by being stronger than a Panther, not by being better armored, not by having a longer range gun. The M18 Hellcat that opened fire on the lead German column at Arracourt on September 19th, 1944, was, by any conventional metric of armored vehicle survivability, one of the most vulnerable tracked vehicles on the Western Front. Its armor was thinner than a half-track. A rifle-caliber machine gun fired at close range could penetrate its side plates. The Germans who tried to kill it the morning could not. Not because it was hard to destroy, because by the time they found it, it was already somewhere else. The M18. Hellcat was designed around a premise that the U.S. Army tank destroyer doctrine of the early 1940s treated as self-evident, but that most conventional military thinking of the era found deeply uncomfortable. The best defense for an armored vehicle was not to be where the enemy was shooting. This sounds obvious, stated plainly. The engineering implications of taking it seriously were radical. Every pound of armor added to a vehicle made it heavier. Every additional ton of weight required more engine power to move, more fuel to sustain, and a lower top speed at any given power output. The designers at Buick's engineering division, working to the Army's tank destroyer command specifications, made a choice that seemed almost negligent to anyone raised on conventional tank design philosophy. They stripped the armor to the minimum required to protect against artillery fragments and small arms, and put everything, budget, weight allowance, engineering attention, into the engine and the suspension. The result was a vehicle that weighed 17.7 tons and reached 60 miles per hour on paved roads. 60 miles per hour. The Panther it would face at Arracourt weighed 44 tons and reached 34 miles per hour under optimal conditions, considerably less on soft ground or in fog. The Tiger I weighed 57 tons and reached 23 miles per hour in good conditions. The M18 could outrun a Panther by 26 miles per hour. It could outrun a Tiger by 37 miles per hour. It was faster than most wheeled scout vehicles the Germans fielded in 1944. The Army's official doctrine for tank destroyer units called this the primary tactical asset. Move to the threat, engage from concealment, disengage before counter-battery. The phrase used in tank destroyer command manuals was shoot and scoot. What that phrase meant in practice, what it actually looked like when executed by a trained crew against superior German armor under fog conditions in Lorraine, was something that German tank commanders at Arracourt described in their after-action reports with a word that does not appear in most American accounts of the engagement: terror. Here is the first unexpected part of this story. The M18 was not supposed to be fighting Panthers at all. Tank destroyer doctrine, as conceived in 1941 and 1942, was built around a specific vision of armored warfare that the actual fighting in Europe, by 1944, had largely superseded. The original concept called for tank destroyer units to operate in a screening role, held back from the main line, positioned to respond to German armored breakthroughs, engaging enemy tanks as they penetrated the infantry defensive line. The tank destroyer was not, in this doctrine, an offensive weapon. It was a fire brigade. By September 1944, that doctrine was already being revised in practice by the units actually using it, because the fluid, fast-moving campaign across France had created situations where tank destroyers were doing things no one in a planning office in 1942 had imagined. They were leading advances. They were screening flanks. They were, at Arracourt, facing a full-scale German armored counterattack in fog conditions that reduced every technological advantage the German Panthers held to almost nothing. The Panther's superiority over the M18 was built on range. Its 75mm KWK 42 gun could kill at 2,000 meters. Its frontal armor could defeat the M18's 76mm gun at ranges beyond 700 meters. In any engagement where the Panther could see past 700 meters and fire first, the M18 was a target, not a threat. In fog that reduced visibility to under 100 meters, none of those advantages existed. What remained was a 44-ton vehicle with a slow turret, a crew that had lost its optical advantage, navigating by compass through terrain it did not know, toward an enemy that could move 26 miles per hour faster, and had been training for exactly this situation. The second unexpected part is what the M18's specific speed enabled tactically that no other vehicle in the American inventory could replicate. The shoot and scoot technique required not just speed, but a specific relationship between speed and the time required for a German tank crew to complete the sequence of hear incoming fire, identify muzzle flash direction, traverse turret, confirm target, aim, and fire. That sequence For a Panther crew under combat conditions with limited visibility, it took a minimum of 8 to 12 seconds from the moment of incoming fire to outgoing response. Under fog conditions with no clear muzzle flash to locate, it took longer. An M18 moving at 40 miles per hour, a conservative figure for its cross-country speed in the Lorraine terrain, covered approximately 530 meters in 12 seconds. From a standing start, it needed roughly 4 seconds to reach 30 miles per hour, meaning the actual distance covered in a 12-second sprint from a firing position was approximately 350 to 400 meters. In 12 seconds, the engagement geometry changed completely. An M18 that fired from a tree line, moved 400 meters, and took up a new hull-down position on a reverse slope was not the same target anymore. It was at a different range, a different angle, potentially a different bearing entirely if the terrain allowed a curved route. The German crew that had finally located the original firing position was now aiming at empty ground. The M18 crews at Arracourt did not shoot and scoot as a defensive reflex. They used it as an active manipulation of German attention, firing from one position to draw a turret traverse, then relocating to a position that was now behind the German guns' facing direction. With a turret traverse speed of over 24 degrees per second compared to the Panther's electric drive at 6 degrees per second under good conditions, the M18 that had maneuvered to the Panther's flank while the German crew was still traversing toward the original firing position had a window of opportunity that it could exploit with a stationary aimed shot. The third unexpected part is what German unit commanders reported about how many vehicles they believed they were fighting. Sergeant Charles Vierling's M18 section, 5 vehicles from the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, was credited in the engagement of September 19th with destroying or disabling 11 German armored vehicles before withdrawing. German after-action reports from the same engagement estimated the American force that engaged their column at somewhere between 30 and 50 armored vehicles. This discrepancy was not a product of confusion or poor German observation. It was the predictable mathematical result of 5 vehicles that each appeared in 6 to 10 different positions during the engagement, firing from each position before relocating. A German commander watching muzzle flashes appear simultaneously or in rapid succession from positions 300 to 400 meters apart, in fog that made vehicle identification impossible, had no way to know that the same vehicles were reappearing in new locations. Every new firing position looked like a new vehicle. The M18's speed had created a tactical illusion that multiplied a section of 5 tank destroyers into an apparent battalion of 40 to 50 by simple geometry and timing. German commanders responding to those reports made decisions, halting the advance, calling for additional infantry support, requesting artillery, based on a force estimate that was off by a factor of 8. The 5 vehicles were, by producing that estimate, as effective as 40. More effective because 40 actual vehicles would have been detectable before the battle even started, while 5 had appeared from nowhere and seemed to be everywhere simultaneously. The Battle of Arracourt ran from September 18th to September 29th, 1944. The 5th Panzer Army committed over 200 armored vehicles to a counterattack intended to destroy the American bridgehead across the Moselle and cut off Patton's Third Army's advance. The American 4th Armored Division, with attached tank destroyer battalions including the 704th, destroyed 262 German tanks and assault guns during the 10-day battle. American armor losses totaled 27 vehicles. The exchange ratio, nearly 10 German armored vehicles destroyed for every American loss, was not a product of superior American tanks. The Sherman and M18 were not superior to the Panthers they were fighting in any conventional measure of armor or firepower. It was a product of the fog, the terrain, and a tactical doctrine built entirely around speed, being used by men who understood that doctrine well enough to execute it under conditions that reduced everything German armor could do to the ability to rotate a turret. The deepest irony of the M18's story at Arracourt is what the German technical assessments of captured M18s, conducted in the winter of 1944 to 1945, concluded about the vehicle. The assessments noted the thin armor, accurately. They noted the open-topped turret that left the crew exposed to artillery fragments and infantry small arms, accurately. They concluded on paper that the M18 was an inadequately protected vehicle that should not be able to survive in sustained armored combat. They were right about every technical fact they recorded. What the technical assessments could not capture was what the M18 had demonstrated at Arracourt, that a vehicle designed not to survive being hit, but to avoid being hit at all, occupied a different tactical universe from every other armored vehicle on the field. The Tigers and Panthers were engineered around the assumption that getting shot was an inevitable part of armored combat, and the solution was to absorb the hit and return fire. The M18 was engineered around the assumption that if you never stayed in one place long enough to be shot at accurately, the whole problem of absorbing hits became irrelevant. In perfect conditions, clear weather, long sight lines, stable defensive terrain, The German assumptions were correct, and the M18 was vulnerable. At Arracourt, in September fog, on broken Lorraine terrain with tree lines every 200 meters, the M18's designers had been right. 60 miles per hour. That was the armor. That was the gun. That was the trick. And it took the 5th Panzer Army 10 days and 262 armored vehicles to figure out they had no answer to it.